everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that follows after the newsletter for St. John's Lutheran Church, Sam Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Case Jeremus. I'm the Creative Worship Director at Our Savior Lutheran in Washington.
Yeah. Now, from what I understand, you have quite the story to share today.
I had something I really wanted to bring up because I thought this was the absolute perfect melding of minds between the two of us.
Oh, yeah.
Because this isn't I guess not an article necessarily, but it's a post that someone made in a group that's called Great Hymns and Songs of the Faith. This is a group, and they made a post called "What Happens When We Do Away with the Hymnals." So I thought this was perfect because obviously, Pastor Chris, you're very knowledgeable in theology. That's tends
to be what I do.
It is what you do, and you enjoy it quite a bit. And my thing is music. So I think this was something I just thought would be really fun for us to talk about.
Sure.
Because we kind of have both sides of that going on. So I thought we'd read through it. They have a bunch of bullet points here and a lot of bullet points. And so we'll get through and see all the things they're talking about and discuss whether or not these are good things or bad things or whatever they're trying to say.
Yeah.
So they say, what happens when we do away with the hymnals? The shift away from hymnals in religious worship marks a significant change in how congregations approach communal singing. Beyond being songbooks, hymnals held a unique place in worship, offering carefully accurated. This is bad. I'm not a good person to be reading in front of people. Curated, music, cultural richness, and a sense of tradition. However, this transition comes at the cost of losing key elements that once defined the worship experience. So that's kind of our basis of what they're talking about.
Okay.
Is that we're losing something in worship if we're not, if we're straying away from using hymnals.
Mm-hmm.
So, established body of vetted songs. That's their first bullet point. Hymnals traditionally consisted of a carefully curated collection of songs that had been selected and vetted over time for their theological accuracy, spiritual depth, and congregational suitability. These hymns often conveyed the doctrinal beliefs and values of a particular religious tradition. The other part in this bullet point is, with the move away from hymnals, there may be a sense of losing this established body of songs that were once integral to the identity of religious community. So, what's your first thought on that?
Well, I mean, again, to some degree, that's kind of vague, and
yeah,
I get what the author is saying, and to some degree, there's a area of correctness. But at the same time, like even within that, even within our hymnals, we have right now the Lutheran Service Book, which is our current hymnal. It's maroon and colored. It's kind of got an embossed cover. It's very beautiful. But it doesn't have all the hymns in it, and we have to have supplemental books. Yeah. And the supplemental books have hymns that just didn't quite make it in for one reason or another. Some of them are, theologically vague, and so that's part of it. There's some other things that kind of take place or what have you. Maybe this one just wasn't popular enough or what have you. And so we do already have like supplemental books, and those have been around for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So some of the ones that we have are very old. Even the supplemental books that we have are old.
Yeah.
Kind of breaking apart. So this idea that that everything is contained in this one book, I mean, that's great if a church can do that. I mean, there is a certain sense of that, I guess. Mm-hmm. But even before the contemporary movement, what I'm saying is we already had supplemental books being printed.
Yeah, it's new music coming out.
I mean, again, as being a good Lutheran that I am, when we say new music coming out, it's not really new.
Right.
Not really that new
stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's not. So I guess what you're saying is that it's not necessarily that you can't do anything outside of your hymnal that's in your pew. Like there's other books and stuff it's not like sacrilegious to use other books or anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would also say though that like, anytime you do start venturing outside of your hymnal, some amount of how would I say that? You want to make sure you're precise with what you get. You do whenever you have your own hymnal, it's like you can trust everything that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you start venturing out, all of a sudden you got to be a little bit more on your A game in terms of like reading through things and making sure it is a trustworthy song or what have you, hymn.
Right.
So it does kind of cause a little bit more work to go on your end.
I sang hymns a lot growing up, but I can't think of any examples, and maybe you can't either, but is there any hymns that you can think of that you're kind of like, yeah, there wasn't really much substance to that?
Oh, there's tons.
Yeah, because there's a couple that recently I've found that they're and I mean, they're not bad melodies or anything, but they just kind of are like, now we're going to communion. Now we're going to communion.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not like there's great depth in singing we're going to communion.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, look, I don't see, I'm trying not to get myself into trouble, but I'm going to get myself into trouble. Because honestly, what it is, a lot of the favorites are very much lacking to some degree.
Oh, really?
One of the big ones that I always point out is actually Amazing Grace.
Oh, really?
Which is a beautiful song.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. And there's nothing wrong with that song. It's absolutely gorgeous. But Newton doesn't talk really about Jesus at all.
Yeah.
He brings up God, I think, in one of the stanzas. Mm-hmm. So one of the verses has it. He talks about grace a lot, but then he never really defines what grace is. And so,
right.
And so, from a theological side of things, like Amazing Grace, as awesome as a song as it is not a real depthy song. It's just not.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's a great song. I'm not knocking it. I think it's a beautiful song. But yeah, if you're looking for something with a lot of theological depth, Amazing Grace is probably not the song to run to.
Interesting. That's interesting. All right. The next point to make is deep knowledge and ability to sing from memory. Hymnals served as a tangible resource for congregants to refer to during worship, but they also facilitated the memorization of songs over time. This resulted in a deep knowledge of the lyrics and tunes, enabling the congregation to sing from memory. The shift away from hymnals may contribute to a decline in the ability to recall and sing songs from memory, potentially affecting the depth of connection and engagement during worship. Now, the one thing, this musically for me, when I read this was the first thing that gave me I don't agree with that at all, because the very fact that you're reading music out of a hymnal kind of means it's not memorized.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with, but it's just the whole idea of, well, this is memorizing music. Well, no, not really. I mean, to me, of course, you may know Amazing Grace, but you may not know the fourth verse of Amazing Grace, or I don't even know if there is a fourth verse. That's my point. But it's just kind of it's a little stretch. It's a bit of a stretch to me.
Well, okay. But I would submit another point because I understand the point that's being made, because it's a point that's made not just for music. It's actually a point for the liturgy as well. Right. The hymnals are heavy. Right. That is to say, hold a hymnal up and hold it up for an hour, and after a while, you're not going to want to hold it anymore.
Very true.
It's heavy. It's and so what people would do is they would actually memorize what they were going to do because they didn't want to hold the hymnal. I know.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So, I mean, there's something you probably didn't think about.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
But the reality is that a hymnal is big, and it's big for a reason. Mm-hmm. It's actually big so that you don't want to hold it.
Interesting.
And they kind of made them that way on purpose, with the idea that, if you did it enough times, you would eventually get it memorized. But again, this is not just for the hymns. Hymns are a part of that for sure. But in a lot of ways, the hymns were the exception, right? You'd memorize the liturgy, you'd memorize the service, and then you would still pick it up to sing the songs. Mm-hmm. Because that was where you needed the book, because here you're doing something that you do, once every, few months or something.
Right.
The songs don't repeat that often.
Right, well, there's tons and tons of songs. So, I mean...
Yeah. and there's
Yeah.
tons and tons of songs. So a lot of times the music on this side were actually the exception. It was the liturgy that was more or less memorized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is some truth in that. Like, we put it in our bulletins. It's real easy to carry, to see. We put it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can kind of look at it and see it. And it's like, you do notice that not everybody quite remembers everything the way that they used to. Now, is that only because of the hymnal? Or is it also because, we've started integrating quick scene changes and with our television, and
Right.
they've done studies, and actually what was really funny, they did a study years ago on SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah.
Of all things, they
Yeah.
did a big study on it and found that kids that watched too much SpongeBob actually had a lower attention span than kids that didn't watch it.
That's fun. That's interesting.
Yeah. And so what they found is that because it has these quick scene changes,
Yeah.
and you'll notice like the progression of things tends to be quicker.
Mhm.
Even
It
to the
does.
point where like TikTok is like
Oh.
a great platform, but and I'll be honest, I get on TikTok or Shorts or like the YouTube Shorts or the
Oh, yeah.
Facebook Reels sometimes, and I'll be honest, if it's over 3 minutes, I'm skipping. I'm like
Yeah.
I'm done,
Yeah.
and and that's what it does. Like, and that's what all these are. Like, I think Vines were ahead of their time.
Vines, for people who don't know, Vine was before TikTok, and Vines were literally, they were 6 or 7
Yeah.
second videos.
Yeah.
And it really exploded for a while because you had to make a very interesting video in 6 seconds, and it's not that easy. But there's some comedians and different people who were on that, and it's just very interesting because, man, there are some really funny ones. There's a lot of really dumb ones.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
It was kind of ahead of its time, and now but TikTok keeps allowing longer and longer videos now because I think they're realizing if they don't, like Vine, they never change. So eventually people are just kind of like, I have nothing. There's nothing else I can do in 6 seconds, so I'm done.
Yeah.
So they've progressed a little bit. But the other part about this that I do find funny now, just because it's a little bit of like, if you're getting rid of the hymnals and you're moving towards like, let's say, contemporary memorization and like, ability to sing is kind of like the foundation of contemporary music. It's like simplifying and catchy and
Yes.
a lot of repetition.
Yes.
So it's not that like for what you were talking about, memorizing so you don't have to hold up the book or having these things, that's to say, well, now people can't memorize. It's like, well, that's kind of the whole point of contemporary music.
Yeah.
So that was like, that's the first thing that I was like, that's a little bit of a stretch because that's really what the whole point of contemporary. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's really lacking is that, like, again, this is whenever you get into these kind of arguments, like, this is always what happens, right? Like, you highlight a very specific point and you don't look at the rest of the picture.
Yeah.
Hymnals were designed to be memorized. I just agreed with that wholeheartedly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Specifically on the liturgy, more on the liturgy than on the music. But also realize, like, in the ancient world, even in Luther's day, they had church every day.
Right. Oh, that's
Like,
true.
now that doesn't
That's true.
mean everybody went every day, but they had church every day. They had a full service every day. And if you were in like a monastery, you had several services in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the monasteries were open to the public, so you could come in and join for services. Now, I don't know anybody who's going to wake up at midnight to do matins, but I mean, they did it every day.
Yeah.
Every single day, they'd wake up at midnight to do matins. So you also have to realize, like, when we say, oh, the hymnals were designed to be memorized, and there's a truth in that. But there's also a truth that, that there's a lot of things that have changed over the years, and it's not just the hymnals. In some ways, you're absolutely right. Like the contemporary worship, contemporary songs are much more in terms of, okay, we're going to make sure that we memorize this, or at the very least get a point out. It might be a very simple point, but we're going to make sure that point resonates and sticks.
Right.
And that's kind of how a lot of contemporary music kind of got really into fashion. But a huge part of that is the fact that they didn't go to worship every day.
Yeah.
Now, if you were going to worship every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and all you did was contemporary songs, you might after a while go, well, I think I need something more. Just I need some more.
Possibly, yeah.
I need more depth. I need more variety. Like even how many contemporary songs? I mean, contemporary is contemporary for a reason. It hasn't been around that long, whereas hymnody has been around for quite literally thousands of years now. And so it's like, okay, well, we got 1,500 years of hymns to choose from, or we have 40 years. Like, okay, there's going to be a lot more options for something like that. And you're going to be asking for more variety. You're going to, and so all those things are playing, are a factor. And part of that factor is the history of church and how you go and how often you go.
Mm-hmm. Now that's interesting because I didn't think about that with contemporary music. Maybe is slightly or maybe is somewhat of a reaction to the fact that people are only going once a week typically.
For sure.
Maybe it's just simplifying, simplifying the music in a way to just get a point across so that it's easy to remember for the week instead of, if you're doing it every day, I can understand a difference in that.
I mean, and look at it this way, like we're seeing this kind of movement even within the realm of like Bible studies and Sunday school and stuff like that. I mean, honestly, one of the things that a lot of people have begun to notice is like, they'll go to a kid will go to Sunday school, for instance, but then the rest of the week, they're not really hearing anything about it. And so what happens is the Sunday school system becomes overwhelmingly simplified. And it does that because it can help the kids to remember a single point. Mm-hmm. If you had 2 points and you were like, okay, I got 2 points and I have to make sure these points are memorized, like, okay, that we can do in Sunday school.
Yeah.
But whenever you take a Bible story, you go like, no, I want these kids to know all of it. Like, no, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It would if they were going to take their Bibles home. They were going to open up their Bibles. Their parents are going to talk to them about it. Say, hey, what'd you learn today? All those things are huge, huge factors, which is part of the reason that like a lot of modern day studies, they either fault on one side or the other. Mm-hmm. Either they overwhelmingly simplify or they create a series of tools to be used sporadically throughout the week. Mm. And it's one of those things where, like, if you can get people to do this sporadically throughout the week, by far superior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But good luck.
Yeah. Right.
And that's not necessarily a knock on anybody. It's just a reality. Like, it just is. It just is a reality that we live in today. Whereas people look at church as a Sunday thing and only a Sunday thing.
Yeah.
And then you start saying, well, you really need to do more, and that becomes problematic.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right, so the next point they make is harmonization and singing in different parts. Hymnals typically include musical notation for both the melody and harmonies, encouraging congregants to sing in different parts. This practice fosters a sense of musical richness and diversity within the worship experience. The absence of hymnals might lead to a decline in congregational ability to harmonize and sing in multiple parts, potentially limiting the musical diversity and depth of worship. So, I mean, I would say there's probably some truth to that in certain ways because I know people who, for instance, there's one girl that they went to an apostolic church that, they don't have instruments. They literally just sing 4-part. Mm-hmm. And it's just one person starts the hymn and then everybody just does it. It's amazing. I mean, it was one of the most incredible things I've ever heard. Like, I went to her baptism. It was like, wow, this is amazing to hear a 4-part harmony, no organ, no nothing. It is incredible. And that girl didn't sing in choir until like her senior year. And then, she went and auditioned and got in the top group because like she can harmonize, like she can sing parts. That's not a problem. So I will say, sure, there's some truth.
And I'd also say, like, look at, again, this is where you look at like contemporary worship and how it formed and how it fostered and came about versus hymnody. Hymnody was designed to be sung by groups. That is their sole main purpose.
Yeah.
Contemporary music, a lot of it was started by bands. Mm-hmm. These are bands are singing songs, and guess what? Contemporary songs, listen to them. Most of them do not, they sing. I don't want to say against the melody, but they don't sing with the melody per se. Not all of them. Some of them do, of course, but not all of them. That is to say, they sound really awesome, and we love them because we're prone to listen to that kind of music, and we like that kind of music. Whereas and I've watched some people say this. I'm not talking like a music expert. I don't know what I'm talking about musically.
Well, and a lot of, I mean, contemporary music, typically the way most people, at least like you look at the big mega churches, they typically always have a soloist lead the verses.
Absolutely.
And then people come in, then the whole group comes in on the chorus. And there are definitely, there's people I know who they really, really hate that because they want to sing everything.
Yeah.
And I get it. I totally get it. You're up there. You want to sing everything. I will also say, though, that when it comes to something where now we all have microphones and it sort of changes our ability to where you can really add texture and color and things that you couldn't do before.
Sure.
With waiting to come in on the third chorus or the second chorus or waiting to come in with a harmony on the second verse. You know, there's just something that's you can add some progress, what's the right way? You can build the song to have a much more impactful feel to it. And I just, it's the same way like when like as a drummer, if I play for a song, I don't just come in right out of the gate playing as loud as I possibly can and like playing a death metal beat, because that would be like way too much right off the gate. It's like most drummers, you're going to start off soft. You're going to play something really light, and you're going to kind of build up to playing something more steady. And then you might build and play something a little bit heavier towards the end to give it that sort of progressive or, building, just something to build onto. And it's because it's something we naturally kind of like to hear. So there's things like that I understand why people don't like to not sing everything, but I also understand why it does sound good and it can add a lot to it at the same time.
See, and this is where like your expertise really does come in, because like I don't know anything about most of the stuff that you just said,
right?
And that's just a reality. Like I don't, again, and this is always one of those things. And I know this will probably come up in one of the other points, but like usually whenever I'm doing song selection, I don't know the melody.
Yeah,
I know the words. Like
right.
I look at the words. I'm a theologian by trade. Like that's what I do. And like, okay, so I've sung enough hymns to know some of them well enough to go, okay, that's a really good tune. I like that tune. That one is pleasing to my ear kind of thing. But like, at the end of the day, like I'm looking at the words, which is why whenever I do choose hymns, I sometimes will talk to the organist and be like, what do you think about this one? And they're like, that one's not very easy to sing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Good words though.
Good words.
Good solid words. But
that's something I've discussed with some people recently too, is that I understand that completely, but also think about the way you probably grew up was everything was accompanied by organ or piano, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
And is that it? I mean, you didn't have, so really when you think about it, you have one element that's accompanying everybody's singing. Mm-hmm. When you start adding a drum set and a guitar and a bass, it becomes to where, do you need all those instruments to play all the time? If all those instruments played all the time nonstop, it would start to feel like everything's the same.
Yeah.
And so they've, over the years, it's been like, how can we not make everything sound the same? And that's, I think, the point of like contemporary music. Now they've had times, now I feel like there's definitely things they've gone into, patterns that it kind of becomes the norm of what people do. But I think when you only have one instrument that's leading everybody, it makes total sense, because what else are you going to look at besides the lyrics? Because for the most part, it's the same accompaniment. It's not like, well, this song
you're hurting everybody's feelings.
I know. Well, I just mean that's what I mean is it's different. It's time. It's just a different setting. You have an organ. It's like, pick the song that matches the the lyrics you want or the theology you're talking about. And when you're looking into, for me, when I'm looking into songs, I think very much about is this song like a fast song? Is this a slow song? Is it like kind of a depressing song that's in a minor key, or all these things? And then that's because I don't want to open the service with something that's really slow and really like sad sounding, because it's kind of like, oh, that kind of welcome to church. Sounds like you came into a funeral. So, but it's different. It's a little different because there's more instruments, there's more voices going on to me. So Yeah, I don't know, but that's one of those things I thought was just interesting to
Sure.
talk about. But all right, but I will also say, I mean, as far as harmonizing, singing, and stuff, there are definitely people who just have a really great gift of harmonizing.
Sure.
I'm not really one of those people. I have to
I know
really
I'm not,
work
so.
at it. Yeah, I mean, I can sing the melody, but I can't. If I'm going to sing a harmony, I really have to go and work on it. I
Oh,
can't
no, I
just
work
pull
at
it out of
nothing.
nowhere.
I just go,
Yeah.
which is why I'm always bad.
All right. So the next point they have is richness and diversity of hymnody. Hymnals often encompass a broad range of songs from various eras, traditions, and cultures. This diversity added a richness to worship, allowing congregations to draw from a wide musical heritage. The move away from hymnals could result in a narrower selection of songs, potentially limiting the exposure to diverse musical expressions and theological perspectives.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
you kind of talked a little bit about that, how there's so
Yeah,
much
and you know, so here's one of the things, and this is kind of like a counterpoint to him, like you know, he seems to be talking a lot like it's make or break, and I mean to some degree, if we like said, okay, we're never going to do hymns at our church again, and we're never going to do the, you know, I would kind of agree with him on that, like a little bit, especially if we're only looking at, like I said, like the last 40, 50 years of contemporary music. That's really slim pickings, just because, first of all, once you look at it from a theological perspective, a lot of those songs are cut out, thrown out. You know, they just can't, they just don't actually say a lot of theology. And then also you lose a sense of depth. Now, that being said, I don't think any of us are, you know, I mean, again, and I realize that's like the whole point of this thing is like, but I mean, yes, if we got up in church and said, we are not singing a hymn ever again, I think that he might have a good argument. But,
yeah.
but again, that's not part of what we're saying. And that's not really what we're saying. And you know, even in our contemporary service, we've done hymns before. You know, we've contemporized them a little bit. You know, maybe gone the guitar route or the keyboard route or whatever you and your magic do. I don't know what that is, but like it's not me. I don't do it. I don't even know what it is. But the point of the matter is that, like, you know, there's still kind of room to include both.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think he's right. I think he's right in that if we were saying, okay, we're never going to use hymns again, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he wants to start talking about the hymnal, but okay, but like I can put the words to a hymn on the screen, like,
right.
You know,
well, and that's something that I've been, especially lately, I've been doing a lot of, like, taking a hymn. The thing about hymns is that typically every beat, because you're singing 4-part harmony and everything's moving around, almost every single note you sing is a new chord, whether you're changing notes or not as the melody. So it's really complex. It's very complex, and that's what gives it that sound of, like, you hear a hymn and you're like, oh, it sounds like hymn, because there's so many chords going. What you can really do, honestly, is cut out about like 60% of those chords, and it still sounds fine if you're just singing the melody.
Yeah.
You know, you can, instead, you know, like I'll a lot of times I can go, you know, you're playing your first chord that starts the song. You can probably play that chord for about 2 measures, but within those 2 measures, you've played about 7 different chords in a hymn.
Yeah.
But really, you can just play the one chord and sing the melody, and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can still, even if you're not singing directly out of the hymnals with those arrangements, you could still sing the hymns, you know, and
yeah. But, you know, and you know, kind of the other point though is, like, I would say though, to some degree, and this is kind of one of the things that you're saying, is like there is a certain sense in terms of depth and quality. Like, you know, now I get it when we talk about, like, well, if you only have an organ, you know, and that's the only piece that you have, and you're right on that point. But I would say though that the hymns seem to have a certain richness that is not always found in contemporary hymns.
Yeah, not always.
And a lot of that comes down to ease of play, and, you know, and the fact that you have to have a whole band up there, you know, and the band is what kind of gives that its depth.
Yes.
Whereas like if you play Beethoven,
Oh yeah.
the depth is not found in the full band. It's found in the chords and changes and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that I don't know anything about, and that's not what I do. So
I know what you mean. I mean, there's a quality there. I don't know if I want to say quality. There's a different feeling to it. You can hear a hymn sung in a contemporary version, and there's a certain sort of feeling to it, and you can hear it done in the very traditional version, and there's a different feel to it. Both can be good in certain ways or certain environments, but so I don't know. I mean, like you said, he is speaking very much in a like all or nothing sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I think putting hymns into contemporary is a really great. I think that's a great thing to do, especially because if it's ones everybody knows, it's people want to sing those. So, all right, next point he gave is liturgical structure and theological education. Hymnals often follow a deliberate order that corresponded with the liturgical calendar or specific themes in religious worship. This structure helped convey theological concepts and educated congregants about the faith journey through the progression of songs. The abandonment of hymnals might result in a loss of this structured theological education and the intentional sequencing of songs, potentially impacting the depth of understanding and reflection during worship. I think, I don't know, to be honest, for me, I know that, we talk a lot about how there can be a lot of depth in hymns, and some contemporary songs don't have a lot of depth, but I will say there are some contemporary songs, like we said, that they really kind of break it down to one point. So the only thing that really kind of, everything I understand what he's saying when he gets to the end where he says impacting the depth of understanding and reflection during worship. I have to say I really do disagree with that, because there's a lot of contemporary music that people really do reflect on, even if it's simple lyrics.
For sure.
And so that's my only.
And kind of a point, like we kind of, when we started this and we started talking, we kind of, brought out the fact that a lot of times, and we were talking about memory, remember, like memory retention, all that. One of the unique things that's been going on is basically since about the, I guess, early to mid 2000, like, so 2006, 7, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We actually saw quite a shift within the realm of contemporary worship and contemporary hymns. And a lot of them actually gained more depth. And now some of them are a little bit harder to memorize.
Yeah.
But the one that always gets pointed out is like the 10,000 Reasons. Like, if you ever actually like read through the words of that song, there's actually quite a bit there.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
And so, yes, on the one hand, we could highlight the fact that some of these contemporary songs are very, very memorable because they break it down to a singular point. But we also don't want to discount the fact that there's quite a bit of, and again, it's a growing number of contemporary songs that are kind of getting out there, and some of them actually do have some depth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of structure and all this other kind of stuff that he brings up, I'd say a couple points to that. First of all, I would say very few people, not saying nobody, but very few people are actually acknowledging and learning from that. In my experience, as I've seen, that's not to say that some people don't. Of course they do. But by and large, things like the church year and the theology that stands behind, what part of the church year are we in and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of that has to be, it's not like the hymnal's just going to do it for you,
Yeah.
It's like even people that have read and looked at the hymnal their whole lives, you start talking about, well, did you know why the paraments are this color? And they have no clue.
Right.
And do you know why you're singing this hymn and not this hymn? Well, I had no clue.
Right.
And again, it's because, I think a lot of us, and this is kind of a knock on us pastors, sometimes us pastors kind of just expect people to pick stuff up, and they don't. Mm-hmm. And so then, like, when we bring it up, we're like, well, of course you've noticed this with this and this. Like, no, and I went through 4 years of seminary education. So of course I had a teacher pointing all this stuff out to me.
Right.
So, and I'll be honest, I would have been just as oblivious as anybody had I not gone to seminary and had classes in, get this, liturgy, the church year, the church structure, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if you really get down to it and really pay attention, is it fascinating and interesting and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right in that structure is definitely there in the hymnals.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, even when we choose the contemporary hymns, like, I know at Sam Prairie, we have somebody that helps us choose the contemporary songs. And quite frankly, she is on the ball. She is always thinking of liturgy, time of year.
Oh, of course.
All the structure and all that kind of stuff. And she thinks about all that stuff. And, I look at the hymns, before service and everything. But at the same time, it's like, that's a huge part of it. Like, that structure is still maintained there, very much so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that structure is maintained. And I think, like, in this person who's posting this, I feel like they might kind of have that black and white feeling of there's no contemporary song that has depth. And to be honest, like you said, some of them actually add to it. And a lot of contemporary songs nowadays actually use hymns as, like, the very popular thing right now is to take a hymn, because they're usually just verse, like the same melody 4 times or something.
Yeah.
And they'll just take the verses of these hymns. They use them they take these hymns, they use them as the verses of a song, and then they write like a contemporary chorus to it.
Yeah. That's
sort of summing up all these verses. And that's so those contemporary songs are actually just, they have the same lyrics. They have the same, so they aren't like losing that depth, depending on the song, but that's a very popular thing to do right now, or has been for a long time, I should say. But yeah, I think that when people get into like, there's no depth at all. It's like, well, I'm not saying some songs don't have
again,
depth.
It's a huge generalization.
Yes.
And and again, kind of how we kind of started this, like there's hymns that don't have a lot of depth either. I mean, again, go back and look. Everybody, I know Amazing Grace is your favorite song in the whole wide world. I know it. I know you have fond memories.
Save the wretch like me. Come on.
And you have fun. Go back and read the lyrics of that song. They're not bad lyrics, but they're not depthy either.
Yeah.
Again, they're not bad. Go. What's that one song? It's kind of like the whipping boy of the hymnal. Like a lot of people make fun of it. That's what is it? Earth and All Stars, I think it is.
Earth and All Stars. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's not a bad hymn actually, but like, oh man. People tear into that like it's Comic Sans, like they just make fun of it. Like I read it or hear that song and I'm like, oh, it's not a bad one at all.
Yeah. I think, and the other thing, which this isn't, they didn't exactly make this point, but I like to reiterate this because there's a lot of people who like to say just like, oh, it's so repetitive. There's no depth to that. I think there's actually sort of an emotional challenge to sing something over and over again and really think about it. There's songs that one of my favorite songs is called we've done it before at church. It's called Surrounded. And you basically sing, "This is how I fight my battles," like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And then
I know the one you're talking about.
It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And I understand some people are probably sitting there going, oh my gosh, we're singing this. It's like they just keep repeating the same words. But it's like, well, but think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about what you're saying? Or are you just thinking, I want to sing something different? Because when you really think about what you're saying, it is kind of like, do you really go to God when you have struggles? Or are you... or do you just kind of, like find other vices in the world to get through times? I think there's just a little, I don't know. For me, I think there's some truth to, or some, I don't know. I think there's depth to it, even though some people want to say there's no depth in it. But I think there can be if you take it on the right way. But, okay, next we have... accessibility for all ages. Hymnals were typically designed to be accessible to a wide range of age groups within a congregation. The inclusion of hymns with varying levels of complexity allowed for the participation of both children and adults in worship. Without hymnals, there may be a challenge in finding a balance that caters to the diverse musical abilities and preferences of different age groups within the congregation.
Okay, yeah, how to say that? I think I guess maybe I don't think that I honestly I don't think that would be true with the LSB. I'm sorry.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to me.
I think a lot of the hymns in the LSB, in fact I know again there's some of them that are accessible to young children, but by and large most of them are just again, Amazing Grace is great for kids.
Yeah.
But I can't remember if Jesus Loves Me is in our hymnal or not.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It might be. And if that's the case, then okay, I guess you got a few songs.
Well, but I don't know. There's, with some of the other points, it's like my son isn't singing the tenor part right now. Like he's 4 years old.
Yeah.
He's not singing the tenor parts to any of these songs. I mean, he can sing the melody, of course, to some things. But I think once again, contemporary music is a very it's meant to be very accessible, easy.
Now, again, if you're talking like we have another hymn that came out years ago called All God's People Sing, and now that has a lot of kid songs or kid level songs in them. But that's not, that's a great hymnal for like chapel and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily something that's used a lot in churches for their church service.
Yeah.
Not saying it's never used. I don't know all the churches, but I just know it's not very often used for the service as a whole.
I also want to know the service where everybody's looking around and like, hey, there's no kids here. All right, let's pull out the really hard hymns. Let's get into the really difficult, the grade 5s, as we call them in band.
The grade 5.
No, oh man, I've been dying to do this one. It's so hard. Let's do this one. I've never heard anybody talk about let's do all the difficult hymns this week. Maybe some people do. I don't know.
That's what we do.
They should put grades, because that's what band pieces, for people, most people wouldn't know this, but they're graded by if you're a 5th grader learning, you're probably you'll play a grade 0.5. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of go all their way up to a grade 5, which is college level, really amazing musicians are playing grade 5s really easily. And so that's what they should have, a little number at the top of what grade each one is and how hard it is. That'd be interesting. All right. So let's see. Okay. Congregational participation and engagement. Hymnals facilitated congregational participation by providing a common source that everyone could follow. The physical act of opening a hymnal and singing together created a sense of unity and shared experience. The shift away from hymnals might impact congregational engagement, as individuals may find it more challenging to follow along with lyrics or participate actively within a common visual reference. And I will say, I agree with that if you're not used to anything but singing with hymnals. If that's what you've grown up with, I think it is probably going to be hard to just stop doing that. But I think to say, no one's going to feel a sense of community, or no one's going to, or not, I guess they didn't say or do they say community? Let me reread that. The physical act of opening a hymnal and singing together create a sense of unity and shared experience.
Hold on. I thought we all had these memorized.
Exactly.
Isn't that the point? I'm not opening up a hymnal.
Yeah, what are you talking?
I have it memorized.
There we go. Contradiction number 1. No.
I have it completely memorized.
Yeah. The fact that someone next to you is opening a hymnal should be offensive and not a form of unity. No, just kidding. But I can tell you, I know it's a very different world for some people, but I think there's a sense of unity in churches that don't use hymnals too. And I understand if you're not used to it, you may feel like, well, I'm uncomfortable with it. And I get that. But it's, again, not black and white to where all or nothing. It's if you're not used to it, of course you probably are uncomfortable. But if you're used to it, you do feel a sense of, unity. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know. That to me, I just think is I can understand if you're personally uncomfortable with it. But, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know. I feel like that one, I mean, yes, there is a certain sense of unity, I guess, that can be done. But again, I think worship as a whole is a unifying thing. So I mean, again, if all you ever sing is praise songs, like in a praise band, like, well, then that's going to help unify you because you're going to be like, this is what I'm accustomed to. This is what I'm used to. And so, yeah. I mean, now I would say though, on the other hand, like there is something to be said about having like a unified hymnal, unified service, across the board, like that is to say from like a denominational standpoint. Like if I knew, well, and actually I'll be honest, like here's one of the things that like I think a lot of people don't think about. Like we criticize the Catholic Church for the whole use of Latin.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, let's be honest. Come on, guys. Stop trying to show off. I'm
kidding.
No, I'm kidding.
But like here's the thing. There's that, and this is the thing that I don't think everybody really thinks about. Like there was a certain sense of genius behind it.
Yes.
And the genius was that like if you knew Latin, you could go anywhere in the world, and as long as there was a Catholic Church, you would know exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Instant, like you knew Latin.
Yep.
Like so, you had this base language, and like a second you knew that, and you had to know it if you really wanted to get something out of church, and so there was a certain genius behind the like going, okay, no, everybody's just going to do Latin.
Yeah.
Like, and the same thing could be said with like the hymnal. Like if we all said, okay, we're all going to do divine service setting 1 out of the hymnal, and that's that. Like there is something that's kind of beautiful knowing like no matter where I go to church,
yeah,
I know, we're going to do this service. Absolutely. Now, that being said, the Catholic Church is then wrong because they made that into like a law.
Yeah.
Like you had to do this. And we run aground in the same thing when we do the same thing. Like we can't make it into a law. We can say, hey, this is what our synod does. This is our preferred thing. We could say all of that. But like the second we begin saying, no, this is like the law of God. You have to use this, do it like this. Like then you run into problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I can understand that to a degree because, well, okay. So are there multiple hymnals to choose from, even in like the Missouri Synod? Like,
so the Missouri Synod has what I'd say is 3 main hymnals, okay. and the first one is called the TLH or the Lutheran Hymnal. Mm-hmm. TLH is an abbreviation, and then the second one is called Lutheran Worship. So the first one is red, it's got a bright red cover. The second one has kind of got like this blue, like marbly kind of cover, and then the third one, the last one, is the LSB, the Lutheran Service Book. Mm-hmm. Kind of those are like the 3 ones throughout history. The TLH came out in, I think it was 1941, reprinted in 63. The LW, the Lutheran Worship, came out in like 81 or something like that. Yeah. And so it's not like we're making these things really all that often.
Right. I was going to say it reprinted what was it 20 years later or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is like, so for instance, the TLH, when it was first printed in 41, it had a navy blue cover.
Oh, gotcha.
It was a deep dark navy blue.
Oh.
But it's one of those things like if you used to be like, if you knew somebody who's old enough, they'd be like, oh yeah, that was the navy blue hymnal. And then somebody else going, no, that's the red hymnal. Like, well,
oh gosh, yeah.
But the navy blue cover was the 41 edition, I remember.
Oh, gotcha. See, so that's interesting because I mean, I would say that is one. I would say that's probably a drawback to some of the contemporary stuff because even if I think that, like, I don't know, I can go to different churches, even the same denominations, if they do contemporary. And it kind of feels like you're in a whole new set of music. Now, they might do some similar songs, but they're usually most of the, like, especially in contemporary, you kind of find a sort of a repertoire of songs you like to do over and over. So, I mean, I've been to churches where they do contemporary worship, and I'm like, I don't know any of these songs.
Yeah.
And some of them are 10 years old, 15 years old, or 2 years old, and I'm going, I don't know these. We never did these at the church I grew up at or the places I went to. So it's just kind of interesting. So that I can understand that if you have more of a general, like every church kind of sings the same thing, Then if you go to another church, it's like you feel pretty at home because you can just jump right in and sing what you're used to. So
Yeah.
I do get that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So that was cultural and historical connection. Hymnals often contained songs that reflected the cultural and historical context of the religious community. These hymns served as a connection to the past, preserving traditions and providing a sense of continuity. The move away from hymnals might result in a disconnect from the cultural and historical roots embedded in the songs, potentially diminishing a sense of continuity and identity within the religious community.
Okay.
Now,
So
these had the blue cover, and these. I'm sorry.
no, there. Okay. So first of all, again, if you make it like a black and white kind of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to do this or you can do this. Like,
Yes.
like if you're tossing out every hymnal, he's got a point.
Yeah. Right.
There is a sense where, I mean, again, when you look at the hymnal, and again, not just the hymns, look at the services that are in the hymnals as well. There is actually a lot of history there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get to some of the hymns, one of the things that you're actually doing is you're singing, and one of the things that you're singing is the strife and the struggle from years and years gone by.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have those same strife and struggles. So there is a reality where you are connecting with the history of the church. Like, you think about it think about it like this. Like, let's say you were writing a hymnal, or not a hymnal, a hymn or a song, a contemporary song,
Mm-hmm.
based on what you see in the world today. Well, you'd probably write it about, gender fluidity. You'd write it about like the transgender movement and all this kind of stuff. Now go back 10 years. Now what are you writing about? Well, now you're writing about homosexual marriage. You're writing about, I mean, you're if you're going to write something that's a little bit more combative, these are the things that you're going to write. Okay, well, we'll go back, 10 years prior to that. Well, think about 2004.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
The debate's going to be completely different. And so that's what it is. Like, so when you pull out some of these old hymns, you're seeing debates that were taking place in the 1500s and the 1400s and in the 10th century. And, there is something that's both very connecting about that, but also realizing realizing that yes, that was a big point. I'll even give you an example. Again, not so much with hymnody, but more with service. Because again, this is a lot of what I deal with in terms of service building. But like if you do, for say, Divine Service Setting 4, which is in our service settings, it is a newer setting. Newer. It came from a bunch of like songs and stuff from if I remember correctly. And the irony is actually is less singing in it than the other services, even though it was designed of that. But what's interesting is that if you look at it for references to the Holy Trinity, it only gets referenced like 2, maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
Now, go just do a standard Matin service. We're not even talking divine service. We're talking what's known as a daily office. So the references to the Holy Trinity are all over the place. Mm-hmm. Well, when Matins was designed, the Holy Trinity was, still being a little bit argued about.
Wow.
Now go to Divine Service Setting 3, which is considered the historical service, liturgy, and look at the counts of the Holy Trinity. Again, it's just all over the place. Like all of the songs, like, whenever we have a Gloria in Excelsis or whatever, like it's everywhere. The Trinity is mentioned all over the place. And that's reflective of the fact that was one of the big debates back in the 300s.
Yeah.
And you get a taste of that even then. Like, okay, you're like, no, we're talking about a triune God, and we're going to make that very, very clear. Like, and so it's like, it's just everywhere. It's just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is true of hymns. Like, when you look at a hymn, you're looking at, a lot of times you're looking at the feelings and the emotion of that time period and of that moment. And it does connect you in a sense.
Yeah.
With that. But again, we don't have a lot of hymns that are focused on right now. We do have some that are getting written here and there, but like we don't have a lot of hymns that are written with our battles in mind and with our culture in mind. And so in a lot of ways, contemporary hymns kind of fill that void. And so I think there's actually a lot of positive. So you don't want to you don't want to, either way, you're kind of missing the mark a little bit. I think if you just said, no, we can't ever do a contemporary song. Well, I think you're missing the mark with the battle cries of today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I do think there's an issue if you say, well, we can never use a hymnal ever again. Like, okay, well,
yeah, of course.
Now you're cutting yourself off from the history of the church. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. I guess a lot of this argument kind of comes down to the, like, it's not about getting, I guess it just depends on what this guy's arguing or who he's arguing with as far as, because, I would never say get rid of the hymnal, by any means. But there's just some interesting, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, again, a lot of the stuff nowadays we're reusing hymn lyrics and things. And so, I mean, I don't think, I understand what he's trying to say, but also I don't think anybody's throwing it away. But anyway, personal and corporate worship integration. Hymnals were versatile tools that could be used both individually and collectively. Congregants could use hymnals for personal devotion or family worship, fostering a seamless integration of religious songs into various aspects of daily life. The absence of hymnals might require intentional efforts to bridge the gap between personal and corporate worship, ensuring that religious songs continue to be part of individual spiritual lives beyond the formal church setting. I think that people sing, I don't know, I think that you can sing any contemporary or hymnal songs anywhere. And actually, like, contemporary is meant to be easier. Like I said, when we talked about chords and simplifying, contemporary songs are a lot, they're kind of, I'm not going to say they're for like less talented musicians or anything, but it's a lot easier to play a contemporary song for me on piano than it is to play a hymn. So it's almost more accessible for me and my family to play something contemporary, if that makes sense. Now, if I was an amazing piano player who could play hymns, which I can't, but if I could, sure, I could play hymns really easily. But it's more accessible for more people who have less training in music to do contemporary.
And again, this kind of comes back down to, like, it's like the same argument that he was using earlier with the structure of the church year. And it's like on the one hand, he has a point, but on the other hand, it's like, does anybody know the point? Like, who, I mean, if I did a poll of the church and I said, okay, who all here, first of all, has a hymnal at home, and second of all, utilizes that hymnal for devotions and worship, my guess is that there are going to be so few hands up, because I'm not saying that nobody does it, but I think a very few do it. Now, I do it.
Yeah,
I actually do.
Yeah.
I've done it a few times with my kids, and I usually I can do a lot of that. I've been known to do a matins, vespers, or compline service all by myself. Like,
Look
I
at
know.
you go.
See, I know
Look
it
at
makes
you.
me sound like super nerdy, but it's like, it's true.
Well, you are.
Like,
and that's
I find
one thing that's lovable about you.
I find that specifically the daily offices that are used to be just great treasures and great wonders, and they're fantastic. They're right in your hymnal. So and get this, you can the accessibility of today's world. You can get the music that goes with it and, like, play it on a speaker or on your phone or something like that, and you can chant with it and sing with it. And so, I did that a long time ago. I actually bought a CD set that went with the divine, not the divine, but the daily offices. And so, but again, I think I'm pretty rare. I do not think that, like, everybody else is out there going like, oh yeah, I do this all the time. Like, now, are there some? Absolutely. And I even know some families that do in fact use that and do that. And I think it's awesome. The more power to them.
But they did steal a hymnal from the church, and that's wrong. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
You know what? For confirmation, I actually got a hymnal.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. It was an LW, so it's dated now.
Well, it's. I will say the one thing, and this is actually something I've thought a lot about since we did the episode where you introduced the Pray Do.
Yeah.
Because I've thought about this a lot, that having okay, we have we have in our pockets at all times basically access to any knowledge that we could ever want, but for some reason, it's for some people, you're not thinking on your daily life, I need to pull my phone out and look up like a devotional, or I need to look up this. And if you have a specific spot in your house where, like, okay, there's our hymnal, there's, whatever we're using for worship or whatever, I can understand the fact of a physical copy, something you can just pick up and open right there, might be something that encourages you to do that more and be more devoted to it. So setting yourself up, it's like walking into a room and you got to pray do there. It's like, maybe I should pray. I would assume, I'm sure you have a very good routine with all your hymn CDs and everything you got. So,
yeah.
But for some people, I'd say, I mean, honestly, if I had a pray-do sitting in here, I probably would walk into the room and go, maybe I need to pray, right now. Like it would make me go, I need to pray, you know?
Yeah.
So I can understand maybe some of that, but yeah.
But to your point though, and again, this is where I come back. Like I guess the argument that he's making is almost like, well, if you use a hymnal, this is going to happen. And I'm like, my thing is no, not without training.
Right.
Now, can it happen? Yes. I think that there can be a seamless integration. And I'm not saying you can't do that with contemporary hymns. I would agree though, that the hymnal is kind of designed with that intention and purpose in mind, but again, that's not just the songs. It also has a daily lectionary. It also has a service, several services that you can utilize at your home and family. It has an entire section of prayers and stuff like. I mean, imagine take the singing aside.
Yeah.
Imagine you had a book that just had all of that stuff in it.
Yes.
Like it would still be a very useful book.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I don't. Again, on the one hand, he seems to be making this about singing. On the other hand, he seems to be making this about the hymnal, and I'm prone to agree with him whenever he says, yeah, if you just ditch the hymnal, well, yeah, the hymnal's an awesome book. I mean, I really mean that. It's an awesome book. But if we're saying, hey, this is contemporary versus traditional, like I'm going to disagree with him.
Yeah.
But if we're saying, yeah, let's throw out the hymnal, like I completely kind of agree with where he's heading.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Okay, scriptural integration. Hymnals often included songs directly inspired by or quoting scriptures, providing a musical expression of biblical themes and narratives. This integration of scripture into worship through hymns helped reinforce the teachings and stories of the faith. The move away from hymnals may result in reducing emphasis on scriptural connections to worship or in worship songs, potentially impacting the depth of biblical engagement during communal singing. I feel like we've kind of covered this.
Yeah.
So there are some hymns that don't have a lot of depth, and there's some contemporary songs that don't have a lot of depth,
Yes.
and then there's some of both that have a lot of great depth. So, and I just with that point, I would love to recommend some. When I was in middle school, Christian screamo bands were very big with my generation. And I mean, people who sound like screaming lions with death metal music behind it. Nice. And there's this band, and I don't think they were huge, but they were called See the Light. And they had this song called Better Get Used to Sore Throats. And it's one of my favorites. It's a great song, partly because they have this gorgeous piano in it. So it's this heavy metal music, and this guy playing this gorgeous piano in the middle of it. But the thing is, the whole song is directly scripture. He's just screaming scripture. It's not like well thought out lyrics or rhyming. He's just screaming scripture. And so it's like, hey, well, that's exactly what he's talking about right there. But yeah, no. Okay. Anything? I mean, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, again, I think we've covered this.
Yeah.
Like you said. I mean, again,
I think he's just trying to add extra points when he's already making. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it's the bullet points. He wants more bullet points.
Yeah, exactly. Adaptability and spontaneity. I feel like this might be the same thing we've already covered. Hymnals allowed for spontaneity and adaptability in worship by providing a comprehensive collection of songs for various occasions. Worship leaders and congregants could easily flip through hymnals to select songs that were relevant to a particular theme, event, or mood. The transition away from hymnals might require a more deliberate selection of songs in advance, potentially limiting the flexibility and spontaneity and responding to the dynamic needs of a worship service. I mean, I don't know what's happening in a worship service that maybe causes it to be like, we got to throw out everything we prepared and we're going to do this instead. I mean, but to be honest, the way we did worship at St. John's is the books, we would have books for the worship team. And the front of the book was all the songs we had planned. And then in the back of the book was all the other songs. It was like, that was the alphabet of everything we'd play. So if for some reason we were playing communion and it was like, wow, we have a lot of extra people today, I would just go, all right, go to pull out Cornerstone. And when everybody flipped to Cornerstone, we just play Cornerstone.
Yeah.
So I would say, I mean, I think I understand what he's saying, but I also think there's definitely plenty of worship praise teams out there who are heavily prepared for this. So
yeah, I think there's a truth in that. I mean, I think almost what he's referencing is like almost like a hymn sing.
Yeah.
But like, again, you know, if you were prepared enough, you could even do a hymn sing with contemporary songs.
Yeah. Well,
look, we do this with Christmas stuff all the time, right? We have these little booklets. They're not hymnals. They're little booklets of like popular, you know, songs. Now, some of them are hymns. Mm-hmm. Some of them are not.
Yeah.
And yeah, all you need is the lyrics because everybody knows that song. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, almost anybody can sing Joy to the World. Now, they might not sing it well, but they can sing it. They know the tune. They know how it goes. Yeah.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like that one, that great contemporary classic.
That's a great one. I had to. I just love it too much.
Right on.
Okay. Musical literacy. Hymnals with the musical notation contributed to the development of musical literacy within congregations. Congregants had the opportunity to learn and understand musical elements such as rhythm, melody, and harmony. The absence of hymnals might lead to a decline in musical literacy within the congregation, potentially impacting the appreciation and understanding of the musical aspects of worship. Now, you as someone who has grown up your whole life, I mean, you've sang from hymnals your whole life, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel as though you really, I mean, it has given you a really good like foundation of music, like reading music?
Well, you see, I don't know if this isn't a real fair question because I mean, like in high school and stuff. Well, not in high school, actually, in middle school, I did play trumpet.
I didn't know that.
I did like learn how to read music and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't quite know if it's fair for me to kind of answer that because I knew what it was.
Oh, okay.
I knew music.
I didn't even know you played trumpet. Wow. Well, look at things.
Well, I don't
learning.
anymore. Like I don't even have a trumpet.
I'll get you one. I'm a music pusher. I will get one for you.
Be playing the trumpet.
You'll be playing the trumpet. I have a band. You just come on over and start playing.
You don't want me in your band.
Oh, I do.
You don't want me in your band.
Well, and this is one thing, and this is really, I'm not docking what he's saying. I do understand, because like I said, there's that one girl I knew that never sang in choir, and then, you know, was in the apostolic church, and she just, like, of course she got in because she could sing, and she knew how to read. So I will say, I don't think it necessarily gives you an exact science. I think there's a lot of people who probably they look at it and just go, okay, well, that thing is above that thing, so I think I need to go up in my voice or go down. So there's people out there who don't know that, oh, that's an A and that's a B flat or whatever. But I will say, I think I hear this argument a lot about music literacy and everything, and music is something that is in your ears, like you hear it. And so writing it down is really just a form of communicating it to people. And of course it's great to know how to read music. I compose music, so I have to know that stuff and I love it. But I also have met several musicians over my years, one in particular that I've done a lot of songwriting with now, who really doesn't read music that well. Yeah. And he comes up with musical ideas that I would never think of because he just sits down and starts playing it until he finds something that he likes. Yeah. And then I sit there and go, okay, well, let me figure out what you're doing. And so, I mean, we help each other in that way, but I've written songs with him that are the songs I like the most. And he's not the most musical literate person as far as like reading music. So that's a pet peeve of mine, just because there's some people, especially when you major in music, who look down on people who only play by ear, or who just, they sing, but they don't know how to really read music, but they're a great singer and they can just kind of make up harmonies. And so I think
going back to the point that I've made a couple times tonight, it's kind of the same deal. It's all there, but it's not like magic. Like people don't just open a hymnal and go, "Oh, I know music now."
Yes.
Like, no, it's like, it's all there. It's all there. There's a lot of beautiful musical pieces. Yes, the notation is there and all that. And if somebody comes beside them and says, "Yeah, okay, here's what this is," can they pick it up maybe even faster? Absolutely, because they've been around it. They understand it, And so, there might be a truth in that, but it's not like they're going to open up a hymnal and all of a sudden magically know music notation.
Yeah, right. All right, we're down. We have only 3 more points, so we'll get through this. This guy wrote a long one. Okay. Familiarity and comfort. Hymnals provide a sense of familiarity and comfort, as congregants often grew up singing certain hymns that became deeply ingrained in their religious experience. The shared history of singing these hymns created a sense of community and comfort. The shift away from hymnals might require intentional efforts to create a new sense of familiarity and comfort with the repertoire of songs, potentially impacting the emotional connection during worship. I think that's kind of a point. I feel like we've kind of
again, this is kind of
gone through that already. The Latin analogy and everything.
We have, and but again, continuity in worship, like yes, but it's also with what you grew up with. So if you grew up with contemporary music, hymnody is going to be foreign to you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's just going to be foreign to you, and and again, there's a lot of beautiful hymns out there. I do think it is important to learn hymns, but again, that's me, the theologian, speaking. That's not me, the musician, speaking. Like, like as a theologian, I think that there's a lot of awesome stuff in those hymnals and with those hymns, and I do think it's actually important from a theological side to kind of build that repertoire. So I do think it's important, but again, I'm also not saying like. Again, if you saying, look, you crank up one of those old like 80s contemporary songs and you'll have a lot of people sing it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people remember those.
Yeah.
It's part of their childhood, a part of this. Maybe you didn't sing it at church, maybe you did. Maybe you sung it at camp or whatever, but you know the song.
Yeah.
And like it only takes a few notes and you're like singing along with it because you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember this one."
Yeah.
Like absolutely.
If Michael W. Smith starts playing, even the Holy Spirit inside of me is tapping its foot. Come on, it is like, here we go. This is the stuff.
Good old Michael W.
Smith. Yeah. So I understand what they're saying to a degree about that, but actually I do the fact of if you shift away from it, you have to create a new like normal. For that makes sense. I mean, have to do that.
There's a truth to that.
Yeah, there is truth to that. All right, cultural and linguistic diversity. Wow. Hymnals often contain songs from various cultural and linguistic backgrounds, allowing for a diverse and inclusive worship experience. This diversity helped congregations appreciate the global nature of the Christian faith. Without hymnals, there may be a need for intentional efforts to ensure the inclusion of songs from different cultures and languages, fostering a sense of unity and diversity within the worshiping community. Okay, well, we all know there was a lot of German composers. So, I don't know how many non-German composers are in the hymnals.
Oh, there's actually quite a few.
I'm sure there are. But, I just joke because when you study music, like history, it's you study a lot of German people. It's just like German, all studied in Vienna. Anyway.
Yeah. And the other thing though that what I think is funny about this is like I also think like the very thing he's talking about is also one of the things that becomes a complaint for most people.
Oh, really?
Well, you think about it, like who knows what the word salutary means anymore?
Oh, I don't know.
That's just not a word that you go around talking about. But we whenever I open up the proper preface, it's like, meet, right, and salutary, and everybody's like, what does that mean? And like, for those that have been Lutheran their whole life, they're like, oh yeah, I get it. good, right, and all those.
That
It's
word salutary.
yeah. But we look like we talk meet, right, and salutary. Like what? But again, that's part of that inclusion of some of that older language and some of that language that's like maybe we're not accustomed to.
Yeah.
Now, are there good reasons for having it? Some of it. I'm not going to say all of it because, again, salutary is one of those words that I think really in our hymnal we could just use the modern word.
Yeah.
And maybe sometime I should start doing that myself. Just like, I don't want to say crossing it out, but, just saying it, the more modern way.
Yeah.
As opposed to meet, right, and salutary. But again, I mean, it's like some of it, though, is like you do think about like some of the hymns that have some of these things. But yeah, but these are the very things that people read or they don't. They just sing over and they don't even think about it. But then when you really stop and think about it, you go, wow, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like,
But I think kind of in the point you said is just because it's there doesn't mean it's guaranteed. So it's like you actually have to take a second and go, wait, what does that word actually mean? Because I keep singing it and I don't know what it means, So yeah, which maybe it will inspire. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of people who, especially when we started doing this podcast and I'd ask questions, so many people have come up to me and go, I had no idea that's why we did that,
Yeah.
And I didn't either. That's why it's fun to ask.
Well, and some of it's a history lesson too, right? Like, I mean, look, one of the Luther's most well-known hymns, A Mighty Fortress.
Oh, yeah.
Classic, fantastic song. There's actually a verse in there that, and I've explained this in Bible class, so people that go to Sam Prairie probably realize this, or at least if they've been at my Bible class, or maybe you forgot, because a lot of people, I don't know, I memorize weird things. But there's a verse in there, and it says, and he's talking about fighting with the devil, and he says, one little word will fell him. What most people don't realize is that at this time period that Luther wrote this was when he was in a fight with Zwingli over the real presence of Christ in Holy Communion.
Oh.
The word he's talking about is the word is. Jesus says, this is my body, this is my blood. He's saying the Anabaptists are basically the devil, and one word is going to knock him down. So, don't let your Baptist sing that song. So anyway... And so like it's like a history lesson in verses, like that's what Luther's talking about in that song.
I'll call up all my Baptist friends. Hey,
Yeah, don't sing this one.
That was a real dig at you guys. I don't know if you understand that or not. Okay, and this is the last point before he has a quick little summary at the bottom. But last point is physical symbolism. Hymnals had a physical presence in religious gatherings, presenting a shared resource and symbolizing the communal act of worship. The act of holding and flipping through hymnals created a tangible connection between the congregation and the musical aspects of worship. Again, you're supposed to have it memorized. You should not be flipping through
That's right. No flipping. You memorize the thing.
Memorize it. The move away from physical hymnals might impact the symbolic nature of congregational singing, and congregations may need to find alternative ways to create a tangible and communal connection during worship. Now, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've never, I grew up with, we had hymnals at my church growing up, and I never looked at the hymnal and thought, there's our thing. That's our thing together, I just never thought, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So
that's me.
Part of this comes down to the fact that we're also talking about a change of mode. If you ever go back and read Socrates, and I realize that, again, I'm a nerd, so Socrates, a philosopher, BC era, not Christian, not Jewish. He was completely anti-writing. Oh. He thought writing was going to ruin everything. Oh, of course. Like, people weren't going to think because they don't talk they don't have to talk anymore. They can just read on a page. Christians were one of the earliest adopters of what's known as a codex, or a book. Before that, it was scrolls. So you can imagine the arguments from back in the day, like, well, with a scroll, you got to take the time to roll both sides, and you got to really focus on the language, and this is going to ruin us. I feel like this last argument in particular is kind of like that. It's like, it's like, okay, so we use a bulletin, we use a screen, we use this, we use that. Like, it's a change in mode.
Yeah.
Like, we could say the same thing. Like, look, all of us holding a bulletin gives us a sense of community. We're all holding that bulletin. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Like, I mean, again, he's made a lot of good points, and we've talked about like that a lot. And so I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, no good points that he made, but like, he made some good ones for sure.
Yeah.
This last one is not one of them, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's all he's talking about a mode of operation, and the mode itself is what keeps us all together. And I quite frankly, I just disagree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think you're getting into a Socrates, scroll codex argument.
Yeah. I mean, we all look at the screen together. So, I mean, that's something. I mean, we all do the same, doing something all together. I don't know.
See, I feel the most left out because I don't get to look at the screen.
You don't get to look at the screen. You have to look at the smaller screen.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to do something about that.
But yeah, so I don't know. That one's a little bit of a stretch to me as well. I think it's I don't know. Again, I never picked up a hymnal and just thought like, we're a community. Like, everybody hold up your hymnal, as some people.
Well, we're going to start doing that every Sunday now.
Oh, good.
Everybody pick up your hymnal and hold it up.
All right, that's
Joel
good.
Joel Osteen style.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
This is my hymnal.
This is my hymnal.
I will sing what it tells me to sing.
I will do what it tells me to do. All right. So, in summary, the transition away from hymnals and religious worship can impact the integration of Scripture, adaptability, musical literacy, familiarity, cultural diversity, and the physical symbolism associated with congregational singing. Addressing these aspects may require intentional planning and creative solutions to ensure a rich and meaningful worship experience for congregants. Which, that last point, I feel like I'm not trying to rip the guy, apart or anything, but to say addressing these aspects may require intentional planning and creative solutions, which isn't there intentional planning in a normal service with hymns, as well? So like, it's kind of saying, well, you might actually have to try. It's like, well, everybody does that. That's
and again, kind of what we've been saying this whole time, like, opening up a hymnal is not going to teach you music. Like, you still have to have intentionality behind it.
Yeah.
You have to have intentionality behind a lot of these things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so he's not wrong.
Yeah.
He's just, again, it's just not like the hymnal is going to be a magic thing. It's like it takes intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So that's the end. That's all for that one.
That's it. That's all we got.
I just thought that was fun because, there are definitely things you brought up that I wouldn't have thought of, just being like on the musical side of it.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a good, perfect episode.
It's a
melding of the minds.
It's a melding of the minds right here. Oh, no, that's awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think it was great. Good discussion. I love it. Absolutely love it. So anyway, I do think that's all the time we have.
Yeah,
though,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah, probably so. So everybody have a blessed week, day, whatever it happens to be. And thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye. So you played the trumpet?